So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to a new module. Woohoo! I added some animations to this PowerPoint, and once again, I'm very pleased with myself on my creative touch. So I hope that you get a little bit of enjoyment out of this PowerPoint. Yeah, and hopefully you don't just think I'm weird doing this at 10:30 in the morning. So it's the little things in life, guys. Oh, come on. There we go. The agenda looks like it usually does. A couple of announcements. I'll actually introduce the third paper in more depth. We'll go over the extra credit and then look forward to the week in front of us. So I haven't had a chance to check this morning, but as of late last night, I was missing a lot of response papers. So if you haven't turned this in, please turn it in to me as soon as possible. Recall that turning in a paper for every module is required to pass the class. So please, if you haven't, turn this in before I hunt you down via email. With the papers that I do have, I am getting grading on those, and I will have them done by my deadline, which this time around is 2 weeks from Friday, from the Friday that you turn them in. And then for the revisions, if you did a revision, you'll see that I finished those up over the weekend. I received several revisions that didn't have the paragraph description of changes, nor the highlights. Please remember to do this for next time because you don't earn as many points back as you would if you did those two things. So without further ado, paper 3. This is my favorite paper of the class, and I hope that you guys will come to like it as much as I do, hopefully. So for this module, you have 2 options for what you write, actually. Both of them are persuasive in nature. You can write a traditional thesis-driven paper, which is what we've done for the first 2 modules, or you can write an open letter. I'll go over the open letter a bit more in depth in a moment, but overall for this paper, the key thing that you're going to do is identify a controversial issue, and controversial in the sense of what we learned about in module 1 about people having different viewpoints on it. I don't want controversial in the common sense of extreme fights and political division and sadness. That's not what I want. But you'll write a paper over this topic, and you're going to be talking to a skeptical audience, someone who is not readily going to believe what you say, someone who needs to be persuaded to think similar to what you do. So this shouldn't be a surprise, but we're going to combine the aspects of the last 2 papers to create this third paper. So instead of analyzing the rhetorical appeals like we did in paper 1, we're going to be using them in our own way to be persuasive. And we're going to be creating a multi-sided argument to enhance our ethos, but also help persuade this skeptical reader. So those 2 key elements from the first 2 papers are back again. So a couple of things that are different about this third paper is that, as I've been saying, the audience is skeptical. The audience is going to disagree with the position that you have. This audience being skeptical is so important to this paper that you'll actually be identifying briefly this audience at the top of your paper when you go to submit it. I'll remind you of that during paper week, but it is an incredibly important aspect of this paper. And thus, using the multi-sided argument strategy, using the rhetorical appeals well, is really important to be able to persuade this person, these readers, to think what we think. So that being said, the focus of your paper is on your audience. You're going to use audience-based reasoning And if you'll remember, that's what I said at the beginning of class, that this class is kind of focused on, is audience-based reasoning. This is where it really shines. So you'll need to be anticipating the concerns, issues, reasonings that the opposing viewpoint would bring up, be able to discuss them in a way that alleviates the concern that they have and brings their thinking to your side of the perspective. Yeah, audience-based reasoning. It's kind of the key thing, hint, hint, wink, wink of this paper. But then again, you'll also be doing research and documenting that research to enhance your ethos. For this paper, you must use at least 5 secondary sources. I anticipate that many of you will use a lot more because 5 is really the bare minimum. And I have told many of you in our one-on-one meetings last week that more sources is generally a good thing, generally. So use more than 5 sources if you wish, and we will practice using proper documentation styles. There is not a required documentation style for this course specifically, because I know that you guys aren't all English or humanities majors. I want you to practice the citation style that's going to be relevant in your life. So the big name styles are MLA, APA, and Chicago. MLA is the one pretty much used by most of the humanities. It's what I use, it's what I'm familiar with. APA tends to be used by the sciences, and Chicago can kind of blend into both. This paper also should be about 1 page longer than the others. You'll find this as a really nice benefit for you to be able to find more sources, discuss your idea in more depth. Yeah, I hope you guys will have fun with this. Like I said, it's my favorite paper, so. Or you can write an open letter. There's an example of an open letter in the textbook, and it's really well written. So if you're uncertain about what this would look like, there's a good example there. But the open letter can be particularly effective if the thing that you're writing about can be directed at a specific person, a specific group or organization. The example in the textbook is written to President Myers of K-State, and you'll see how that, because the author's audience is so specific, it's very effective in its persuasion and its persuasiveness. But like for the most part, the open letter and the traditional thesis-driven paper are similar. You still need to identify a skeptical audience, and this audience might not be as skeptical in the open letter as much as it may have a stake that you are addressing. They're doing one thing, you want them to do another. Both use the multi-sided argument strategy, and both require you to use what you have, sources, language, all that good stuff, to enhance your ethos, to position yourself as a respectful, knowledgeable, yet concerned customer, citizen, student, whatever you may be in relation to the issue. So these are the key objectives of this paper. I wanted to go over them briefly, hammer these points home. The first thing that you need to do is engage a controversial issue, controversial in our academic sense of, controversial issue with a multi-sided argument strategy. Probably one of the most important aspects of this early stage of developing your idea is to discuss and identify a resistant audience. If you don't have a resistant audience that you can anticipate the claims, the reasonings, the ideas that it would have, if you can't discuss that, you're gonna have a hard time writing this paper. This is the biggest probably point of this paper. So make a mental note of that. You're going to provide common ground between your position and the opposing viewpoint. There needs to be some way that the two can meet in the middle. One concede to the other in some way. You can also use rebuttals, but you're going to have to entertain the ideas that they would have. But then you develop your own claim, while you address the concerns, the ideas, all that the opposing viewpoint would have, your goal is still to get them to adopt the position that you have on the issue. So that developing your own claim is still very important in this paper. And then we've already discussed briefly finding sources, finding 5 credible sources. You should probably be using the library's database to find these sources, and then practicing documenting them correctly. So what can I write about? Did I read your mind on that? Are you thinking that? It's your choice. Woohoo! I love my little animations. So there is a catch to this. You can't write about anything. There are a couple of topics that may not be written about. I will not accept papers on these topics. Marijuana legalization, abortion, gun control, student athletes being paid, raising the minimum wage, or anything with extreme political bias. So I'm thinking talking points for that. I will be going over topics as you guys create them. The assignment for tonight asks you to brainstorm a topic and a skeptical audience to use. I'll be monitoring that discussion, letting people know if they need to narrow their idea. If their idea is successful, we'll be successful in meeting the objectives of the paper. But I do absolutely reserve the right to tell a student that his or her idea is a little bit too broad or controversial, or not controversial enough. So if you're uncertain about where to start to think about a topic, the best piece of advice that I can give you is to start close to home. Think about your major. Think about the issues in your major, or like in the larger field of your major, and find a way to write about that. That is absolutely the first place that I would start to come up with the topic. It's not necessarily what you have to do, but if you're looking for something that is relatively easy to write about and relatively interesting, I definitely start with your academic / career interests. As I say on the slide, not only will this help make the paper be a bit more fun, it's always more fun to write about something that you're actually interested in, but you can also take this opportunity to really study something in your field. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone that way. And if that doesn't work, you're just not feeling any of those topics, think about something that you're passionate about, but be careful that it's not too broad. Think about the hobbies that you have, the things that you love, the things that you really hate. I think, for example, I absolutely love visiting national parks, so I could write a paper about how national parks should receive more funding or something along those lines. Taking something that I'm passionate about, finding a topic to write about it. But make sure that it isn't too broad and that it isn't too heatedly controversial. For the most part, you should be able to reasonably convince or persuade someone of your opinion within these 5 pages. There are some topics that just cannot be done in that. That's where the extreme political bias comes in, that we only have 5 to 7 pages to work with here, and there can be entire theses written on certain social issues, political issues. So I think kind of keep that in mind as you're choosing your topic. 5 to 7 pages really isn't a whole lot. So make sure that your topic is something that you can do within that boundary. So there are a couple of weaknesses with this paper, as there is for any paper. So to briefly go over some of those, make sure that your topic is controversial. We don't argue facts, even though some people like in larger society think that we can. In an academic sense, we don't argue facts. So make sure that you aren't arguing a fact. And as I've been saying for the last several minutes, don't choose a topic that is too controversial. Another way to think about this is that if you can't find any common ground with the opposing viewpoint, if you can't begin to think about why they would think what they would think or understand it, it's not a good topic to use. And that goes into my next point. If you can't understand the skeptical audience, if you can't entertain their reasoning, their ideas, etc., it's not a good topic to write about. We're not writing solely from our own perspective for this paper. We're not writing a traditional like argumentative paper in the sense that each paragraph is solely your voice proving why you're right. Instead, you're going to be addressing the claims, the concerns that the opposing viewpoint has, and try to persuade them to thinking that your observation, that your evidence, etc., is more correct, more accurate, encompasses the issue better, whatever it may be. So extra credit time. Let's get your participation for the day. In the chat, I would love for you to start brainstorming a topic idea. I know it's kind of early and that we've only just started talking about the paper, but your assignment tonight asks you to identify a topic in a skeptical audience. So I'm wanting to get the gears going on that. So let me know in the chat where your mind is taking you. All right, getting some ideas coming in. The effects of food waste and how policies can be implemented to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those are two very different things. So I would say choose one or the other, reducing food waste or doing greenhouse gas emissions. Once again, you can write thousands of pages on each of these topics, so make sure to separate them. And I'd find a way to narrow it. You could talk about specifically Kansas or wherever you're from, specifically K-State. That is currently very broad. Oh, the death penalty. I just wrote a paper on the death penalty. Oh, you emailed me this morning. I'll talk to you about that. The death penalty is quite a big topic, so we'll discuss that. Taking a blue-collar job rather than going to college, that could be really good. You could talk about, you know, K-State's lower enrollment, and are people just going to trade schools? That could be really cool. Tyler, it is important to continue research in mathematics. I am interested in that. I'm curious about what I would suggest is take a specific avenue of what kind of mathematical research needs to be done. But that could be really cool. Standardized testing. Once again, that's really broad. Maybe take that to Kansas, maybe take that to a certain school district. Privatized medicine has room in there. Once again, that's kind of broad. Privatized medicine. Maybe you could focus on a specific pharmaceutical company. That one is kind of broad. I might be sending you an email to discuss that one further. Talking about the Dr. Seuss books. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up a specific example of the Dr. Seuss books as an element of like America's not so great history that you want to discuss. I don't think it's too narrow. I think that that is great. Yeah. Yeah, I'm liking the ideas that I see so far, but you definitely need to consider some ways to make it more narrow. A lot of you guys are talking about issues that could be like national. A good way to consider narrowing those is to make them more local. So either like specifically Kansas, specifically Kansas City if you're from Kansas City. But yeah, take those national ideas and bring them in just a little bit. Relying on the ACT and SAT to judge a student's ability to succeed in the world of college. That could be a good one. And you could relate that specifically to like the universities in Kansas. Yeah, I'm liking what I see so far. Good job, guys. And as I said, you'll get the opportunity tonight to develop those ideas a little bit further. It's also a discussion, so I want to see you guys pushing each other to come up with good topics. Think about these things that I'm saying, you know, is this topic specific enough? Does it have a narrow focus? Is it an issue being discussed on a national level when it could be brought to like a state or city level? All of those things are good to keep in mind. So here's the week. You've got the typical overview of the persuasive research essay. So if you want to revisit the objectives, the kind of guidelines of the paper, you can do that there. You've got 2 TED Talks to watch for today. I find them pretty entertaining. I hope that you find them entertaining as well. And then, as I just said, you've got a discussion for tonight. I want to see good constructive criticism, really push each other to come up with good topics. And then the other 2 assignments, an audience analysis and the reading quiz, both of which are not too bad. So I think you've got a relatively easy week. But if anything doesn't make sense, please send me an email. And with that, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, or even epiphanies at this point? About your topic, about the requirements of the paper, anything? Okay, I will take that as a no. If you do have a concern about your topic, about the paper, about anything, send me that email. But like I said, I will also be checking that discussion board a lot throughout the day. So with that, goodbye.